They said they didn't care. They acted like losing you meant nothing. But the moment you disappeared was the moment they started to feel everything, and they never saw it coming. When an avoidant loses someone, the emotional impact doesn't show up like a tidal wave. It doesn't come fast and furious like it might for others. Instead, it creeps in slowly, quietly, and destructively, long after the moment of separation. In real time, they seem fine. They might even seem relieved, cold, detached, distant. But what most people don't understand is that this isn't because they don't feel. It's because they can't handle feeling everything all at once. You see, avoidants are experts at emotional suppression. Somewhere along the way, usually in childhood, they learned that feelings were either unsafe, ignored, or punished. So what did they do? They adapted. They became self-reliant. They shut down emotionally. They built walls. And those walls served a purpose: survival. So when you walk away or go silent or finally say, "I'm done," their first instinct isn't grief, it's shutdown. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because their system refuses to process the pain in the moment. They bury it, suppress it, detach from it. And from the outside looking in, it appears like they never cared. But that's the illusion, because the truth is they're delaying the explosion. They're postponing the grief. They're deferring the heartbreak to a later time when they feel safe enough to experience it. And that later often comes when you're gone, truly gone, when there are no texts to read, no calls to return, no chances left to pretend. That's when the delayed impact begins. Like an emotional boomerang, all the feelings they've been avoiding come flying back at them. And now they have no distraction, no buffer, no way to sidestep the storm. That's why your disappearance is so powerful, because it's not the event of losing you that breaks them. It's the realization, weeks or months later, of what they've lost. And by then, you're no longer playing the role of the emotional caretaker. You're not there to help them understand it, soothe it, or fix it. They're alone in it. And for someone who's built their identity on not needing anyone, that's terrifying. So don't be fooled by the initial silence. Don't assume they're unbothered just because they didn't chase you right away. The clock is ticking. The impact is coming. And when it hits deep. Avoidants often operate under a deep need for control. It's not always obvious, and it's rarely aggressive, but it's there, quietly guiding their every emotional move. Control to them equals safety. As long as they can predict outcomes, manage the emotional closeness, and keep some distance between themselves and others, they feel secure. That control gives them the illusion that they won't get hurt, won't be abandoned, and won't be vulnerable. Now enter you, someone who brought connection, depth, and presence into their world. You challenge that emotional distance not by force, but just by being real, by showing up, by caring. And while they may have responded with mixed signals, hot and cold behavior or withdrawal, a part of them became quietly reliant on your emotional consistency. You became part of the structure they felt they had control over. You were always available, always understanding, always there. Even when they pushed you away, you came back. That dynamic made them feel emotionally superior, like they held the power in the relationship, even if they didn't admit it to themselves. But when you disappear, truly, completely disappear, that illusion shatters. Suddenly, you're not responding, you're not chasing, you're not waiting around. And they didn't plan for that. You see, they counted on you always being the one who stayed, the one who sent the follow-up text, the one who reached out after the silence. But this time, you've gone quiet. This time, you're no longer giving them that emotional reassurance. And that's when they start to panic. Not outwardly, but internally. They lose the sense of control they once had. The balance shifts. And for someone who has spent their entire emotional life avoiding the unpredictable, that shift is deeply unsettling. It forces them to feel powerless, something they've spent years protecting themselves against. They might not show it. They might keep the same poker face, but inside, they're spiraling. The fear of losing you is one thing. The fear of not controlling how it happens, that's entirely different, and it hits even harder. Because when they can't control your presence, your attention, or your energy anymore, they realize they never truly had control in the first place. And that's when the emotional chaos begins. Avoidants are often seen as the ones who leave first. They pull away, they create distance, they shut down emotionally, and it can feel like they're cold, uncaring, even heartless. But beneath that exterior is a wound they've been carrying for most of their lives, the deep, invisible scar of abandonment. It's ironic because they often abandon others before they themselves can be abandoned. But make no mistake, that's not strength. That's fear in disguise. When someone important to them disappears, truly walks away, it doesn't just hurt them in the present. It reactivates something buried in their past. For many avoidants, emotional closeness felt unsafe growing up. They may have had caregivers who were inconsistent, emotionally unavailable, or even neglectful. So their nervous system adapted. They learned that needing others was dangerous, that connection was unreliable, and that love often came with conditions. And to survive, they developed a coping mechanism. Don't get too close, don't rely on anyone, and don't feel too much. But here's the twist. They still wanted love. They still long for connection. They still crave the emotional bond they never quite received. And when someone like you comes into their life and offers that love, consistently, deeply, openly, it stirs something in them they're not prepared to handle. At first, they resist it. Then they grow dependent on it, even if they don't show it. But when that love is suddenly gone, when your presence is no longer felt, the original wound, the primal fear of being left unloved and unwanted, is triggered all over again. They may not cry, they may not reach out, but inside, the panic sets in. Because your disappearance confirms their deepest fear, that people don't stay, that connection isn't safe, that if they let someone in, that person will leave, just like before. And the worst part, this time they actually cared. This time, the person leaving was someone who saw them, even when they couldn't fully show themselves. And losing that's not just about losing a partner. That's about losing the one person who touched the part of them they've kept hidden for so long. Your absence becomes a trigger for their abandonment wound, not because of what you did, but because of what they never healed. And now, they're left with everything they tried to avoid, feeling grief, regret, vulnerability, and the terrifying question, what if I pushed away the very thing I needed most? Avoidants are masters of emotional numbness. It's their shield, their armor, their way of staying safe in a world where emotional closeness once felt dangerous. They've spent years training themselves not to feel, or at least not to look like they feel. They've convinced themselves that being detached is power, that staying calm and composed is strength, and that pushing emotions away is the only way to avoid pain. But the truth is, numbness isn't the absence of feeling. It's the over-control of it, and over time it cracks. When you were present in their life, texting, calling, showing love, showing care, they could keep that numbness intact. Your emotions filled the space. You were the emotional engine of the relationship, constantly bridging the distance they created. They didn't have to face themselves because you were always there, absorbing the tension, trying to understand, trying to fix. But when you stop, when you finally pull your energy back and go silent, something begins to shift. In the beginning, they may feel a strange sense of relief. No pressure, no expectations, no emotional weight. But over time, that relief turns into discomfort, then confusion, then unrest. Because in the silence you leave behind, there's no more distraction, no more noise. And what's left is something they've been avoiding for years themselves. Their own thoughts, their own emptiness, their own buried feelings. The numbness starts to crack when they realize you're not coming back, that you're not just doing the usual pullback. You're really gone. And with every day that passes, the emotional fog begins to lift. Memories hit differently. Conversations replay in their mind. Things you said, moments you shared, they start to feel real in a way they couldn't access before. The emotions they locked away now start to leak out. It's not loud. It's not dramatic, but it's deeply unsettling. They may try to numb it again with distractions, work, other people, even silence. But the seed has been planted. The feelings have awakened. And now they're faced with something they don't know how to manage, the realization that they actually cared, that they were affected, that your absence has created a void that can't be filled by logic, pride, or ego. And this is when they begin to realize the cost of emotional numbness. It doesn't just block out pain, it blocks out love. And when the numbness fades, they're left to face the very thing they ran from all along, the depth of what they lost. When you step away from an avoidant, Especially after trying again and again to connect, something powerful begins to happen, not just in them, but in you. You begin to shift your energy inward. You stop giving them all your emotional labor, your overthinking, your anxiety, your hope, and instead of pouring into a black hole of avoidance, you start pouring into yourself. That growth, that personal transformation is what shakes them at their core. See, avoidants are used to being the ones in control, emotionally and mentally. They assume that you'll always be orbiting around them, waiting for a text, trying to decode their mixed signals, holding on to the idea of what could be. And let's be honest, for a while you probably were. You were emotionally invested, deeply connected, trying to hold space for a person who couldn't meet you where you stood. You were patient. You were loyal. You showed up. But when you finally stop, when you disappear and start focusing on yourself, they don't just feel your absence. They see your growth. And it stings. They check your stories. They notice you're not posting about pain or heartbreak. They see you smiling, laughing, maybe even thriving. And even if they don't show it, their mind starts spinning. How are you okay without me? How are you moving on? Was I not important? But it's not just about you being fine without them. It's about you becoming someone they no longer have access to. Your growth in the silence reflects what they've refused to face in themselves. While you're evolving, they're stuck. While you're healing, they're avoiding. While you're leveling up, they're still running from their own emotions. And that contrast becomes a mirror, a painful one, because for the first time, they're not the emotionally superior one. For the first time, you're the one who's emotionally regulated, grounded, and empowered. And what's more unsettling for them, you're not trying to prove it. You're not doing it for revenge or validation or attention. You're just living quietly, fully, authentically. And that is what triggers their reflection, because the person who once begged for their love is now showing what self-love really looks like. And deep down, they know they can't match it. Not yet. Not while they're still hiding from the parts of themselves you've already confronted. Avoidants are often misunderstood when it comes to love and connection. They don't chase people, not in the way many expect. They don't run after you with dramatic texts or emotional pleas. They rarely beg. And if you're waiting for that kind of reaction after you walk away, you might feel disappointed. But here's the truth: avoidants do chase. They just don't chase you. They chase comfort. They chase emotional safety. They chase the illusion of control. And when you were their source of that comfort, even quietly, even subtly, your disappearance doesn't just affect them, it destabilizes them. You were the emotional anchor they refused to acknowledge, the consistent presence that allowed them to keep their distance without completely disconnecting. You might not have realized it, but you were providing them with emotional nourishment, even while they acted like they didn't need it. And because you were always there, always understanding, always patient, you became their safe zone, the place they could return to without judgment, the person who would always forgive, always try, always stay. But the moment you disappear, the moment you stop calling, stop checking in, stop reaching out, they lose access to that comfort. And that's when things begin to shift. Not outwardly. Avoidants rarely show their cards, but inwardly, they begin to feel the withdrawal. Your energy is no longer there to soothe them silently. And while they may not pick up the phone and tell you they miss you, they start reaching in their own covert ways. They check your social media. They scroll through your old messages. They replay your voice notes, reread your texts, and linger in the silence you left behind. And every time they do, they're looking for a hit of what you used to give them comfort, that emotional safety, that subtle feeling that someone was there. Not demanding, not overwhelming, just there, because they're not comfortable in chaos. They're not comfortable being out of control. So when you remove your energy, they don't know what to do with the void. And instead of chasing you with words, they chase the feeling of who you were when you were present. They chase your memory, your warmth, your attention, even if it's just a digital trace. They won't admit it. They might even pretend they're better off. But deep inside, they're feeling the ripple effects of the comfort they lost. Because when avoidants lose someone who gave them safety, even in silence, they begin to realize that what they were avoiding was never you. It was the parts of themselves that only you could reach, Time is often romanticized as the great healer. Give it time, people say, as if the mere passing of days and weeks is enough to mend wounds and change hearts. But when it comes to avoidance, time doesn't do what it does for others. Avoidants don't heal by letting days go by. They heal, if at all, through disruption, through silence, through space that forces them to face what they spend their lives avoiding. That's why your silence is more powerful than your presence ever was. Avoidants are experts at using time as a distraction, not a remedy. After a breakup or disconnect, they may throw themselves into work, hobbies, or surface-level distractions. On the outside, it may look like they've moved on, fast, no breakdowns, no emotional outbursts, just functioning, seemingly unaffected. But time for them is a way to avoid feeling. It's a buffer. It creates the illusion that everything is okay when really it's just emotion deferred, not processed. Your silence, however, doesn't give them that luxury. Silence isn't just quiet, it's confrontation. It's the loud absence of what they once had. When you're no longer reaching out, explaining yourself, or keeping the emotional line open, they no longer have the comfort of skimming the surface. Silence forces them into emotional territory they're not equipped to navigate. Without your voice filling the gaps, without your presence smoothing over the rough edges, they're left with the consequences of their choices. Silence is the mirror they can't avoid. It reflects their patterns back to them. It holds up their behavior without judgment, but also without comfort. They're not used to that. They're used to managing everything on their terms. But silence removes their ability to control the narrative. It's in the silence that avoidants start to question. Not always right away, but eventually. The longer your silence lasts, the deeper the questions become. Why did they leave? Did I push them away? Was I cold? Did I care more than I thought? These thoughts creep in slowly, then all at once. And in those moments, time doesn't feel like healing. It feels like pressure. Every day that passes without you reaching out becomes another day they have to sit with themselves. No distraction, no emotional fix, just silence and the slow, dawning realization that maybe, just maybe, they let go of something they were never ready to lose. That's the kind of pain no clock can outrun. Disappearing doesn't mean you gave up. It doesn't mean you were weak, bitter, or trying to manipulate the situation. It means you woke up. You finally saw that no matter how much love, patience, or understanding you gave, you couldn't make someone love you in a way they weren't ready to. You realized that holding space for someone who keeps retreating isn't loyalty, it's self-abandonment. And when that awareness hit, you didn't explode. You didn't beg. You didn't dramatize your exit. You simply disappeared. And that silence was louder than anything you could have said. For an avoidant, your disappearance lands differently than anything else. Arguments don't shake them. Tears don't move them. Ultimatums rarely work. But quiet, steady absence, that's what cracks their armor. Not because they suddenly become someone else overnight, but because your absence forces them to sit in the emotional emptiness they've spent years denying. When you're no longer available to absorb their distance, manage the tension, or chase after the scraps of connection, they begin to feel what they pushed onto you all along. They feel the weight of their coldness. They feel the sting of their silence. They feel the cost of the emotional walls they thought were protecting them, but were really keeping love out. And for perhaps the first time, they feel it alone, without you there to soften the blow. This is where the shift happens. They don't just miss you. They miss who they were when you loved them. They miss the safety of being seen and accepted despite their distance. They miss the emotional cushion you always provided without asking for anything in return. And they begin to understand something they couldn't grasp before. Your love wasn't weakness. It was strength. The kind of strength they didn't know how to receive, so they pushed it away until it was gone. But now they're left with the echo of that love. And the silence you've chosen isn't an attack. It's a declaration. It says, I will no longer participate in my own neglect. I will no longer beg to be chosen. I will no longer prove my worth to someone who refuses to face their own heart. That kind of silence doesn't scream. It doesn't chase. It just leaves. And in doing so, it becomes unforgettable, because walking away in your power speaks volumes. And whether they ever say it or not, they'll feel it, not just the loss of you, but the loss of the version of themselves they were only able to access when they had your love. So many people misunderstand the avoidant and even more misunderstand their own power in the dynamic. You might have spent months, even years, questioning yourself, wondering why you weren't enough, why someone could act so indifferent after all the love you gave. But now you see, their silence didn't mean they didn't care. It meant they didn't know how to care in the way you deserved. And their coldness wasn't proof of your insignificance. It was evidence of their own emotional limitation. They weren't protecting themselves from you. They were running from what your presence awakened inside of them. When you disappeared, the story didn't end. It began. That was the turning point, not just for them, but for you. Because in that moment, you stepped out of the cycle. You broke the pattern. You stopped being the one who overgave, overthought, and overextended yourself to keep something alive that only you were fighting for. And what happened when you went silent? They began to feel. Not because you forced them to, but because they had no choice. When your energy was gone, the void exposed everything they had been suppressing. That's the irony. They thought they'd be free when you left, but that's when the emotional prison started to crack open. You see, you were never the problem. Your love was never too much. Your consistency was never weakness. In fact, it was your very presence that showed them what true emotional safety looked like. And it is your absence that made them finally confront the very wounds they refused to acknowledge. It's only when the comfort is gone that avoidants begin to feel its value. And that's when their emotional world starts shifting. It might be quiet, it might take time, but something inside them begins to awaken, something they can't unfeel now that you're no longer cushioning their detachment. But this journey isn't about what they're feeling now. It's about what you've reclaimed. You reclaimed your worth. You reclaimed your peace. You stopped negotiating with someone else's fear and started honoring your own heart. And whether they come back or not, whether they ever speak the truth out loud, none of it determines your value. The fact that they had to lose you to feel everything is not your failure. It's their lesson, one they'll carry long after you've moved forward. So walk with your head high, not in bitterness, not in revenge, but in truth. Because when you disappeared, you didn't vanish in silence, you rose in strength. And while they're just beginning to feel the aftermath of what they lost, you are already becoming the version of yourself they were never ready to meet. And that right there is the kind of growth that turns pain into power. Thank you for watching this video. If it resonated with you, if it made you feel seen, understood, or just a little bit stronger, know that you're not alone on this journey. Healing from avoidant dynamics isn't easy, but every step you take back to yourself is a victory. If you found value here, consider subscribing, not just for more content, but to remind yourself every day that your peace, your power, and your healing matter. Hit that like button if this message spoke to you, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below and let me know what part hit the hardest for you. I read every single one. And remember, sometimes your silence says more than your words ever could. Until next time, take care of your heart, protect your peace, and never forget your worth. See you in the next video.